On July 21, 1861, the first major battle of the Civil War began. It was known as Bull Run. This was between the Union and the Confederacy. The Union soldiers were referred to as Yankees, and the Confederacy soldiers are called rebels. During the 2-month war, the Yankees lost 481 men, 1,011 were wounded or sick, and 1,216 were missing. The rebels lost 387 men, 1,582 were wounded, and only 13 were missing. Some key players in this battle on the Union side were General McDowell, General Patterson, and on the Confederate side were Beauregard and Joseph E. Johnston. This battle took place at Manassas Junction, Virginia. The battle was a clear Union victory as General McDowell struck first and pushed back about 4,500 rebels in the first 2 hours of the war. This was recognized as Rebel Yell. It was a counterattack along the river that separated the two sides. Stonewall Jackson was a significant part of the portion of the war because he was a leader who fought alongside his men. The Battle of Bull Run was crucial to the outcome of the Civil War because the Union underestimated the Confederacy. This strengthened the Union, but mostly the Confederacy.
The Second Bull Run was a battle that happened during August 29th and 30th, 1862. It concluded as a Confederate victory. After the Peninsula Campaign, Confederate General Robert E. Lee sent Stonewall Jackson to launch the Federal Army of Virginia. The Peninsula Campaign was when President Lincoln sent General George McClellan to lead the army southwest of Manassas, Virginia. The campaign was an attempt to capture the Confederate capital at Richmond. The Federal Army of Virginia was led by General John Pope and spread over North Virginia. John Pope was waiting to join forces with the Army of the Potomac. The army had over 10,000 men. Jackson took possession of the site of Pope's massive supply depot, or the Manassas Junction. Pope thought he could move quickly because he believed that his men would overwhelm Jackson before James Longstreet arrived. James Longstreet was a Confederate soldier. Jackson had left and burned the supplies before Union troops could arrive on August 28th. Pope issued orders for his many divisions to follow Jackson, but Pope thought Jackson had moved to Centerville, Virginia. The Yankees were attacked as they marched by Jackson. This was because Jackson knew Longstreet would be arriving the next day. The battle continued into the night. There was a stalemate with many casualties. Rufus King, the Union commander, took his troops out. On August 29th, Pope made an order to attack and started a series of assaults at the railroad cut on Jackson. Major General Fitz John Porter was ordered by Pope to take position between Jackson and Longstreet. Stonewall Jackson was waiting to join Longstreet. While that was happening, troops from the Union reached the field and joined in on attacks on Jackson's line. Pope was unable to organize the attacks. At the end of the battle, Jackson stayed in his position, and extending south of the Warrenton Turnpike was the Confederate line. Pope began to realize that his enemy was not going to retreat in the early morning on August 30th. A decision to have a massive attack was decided by Pope. A little bit after 3 o'clock, Pope sent Porter to attack Jackson. Even though they were courageous, Longstreet's artillery held off Porter's troops. As a result of that, Major General Porter drew back. Confederate General Lee ordered Longstreet to move forward. This was because of Pope's largest attack. On Chin Ridge, the rebels moved forward to meet the Union line that was the closest. This was where the Yankees had managed to hold on long enough to wait for another line to take position. Pope ordered a retreat for the entire army. On September 1st, the campaign ended. The Union had about 16,054 men killed, wounded, or missing. 9,197 people were killed, wounded, or missing from the Confederacy.
It was a Confederate garrison on the Tennessee River. Tennessee was the key to the West. Fort Henry covered 3 acres of ground and a solidly built 5-sided earthwork wall on top of a trench. It was on the east bank in Stewart and Henry counties of Tennessee. The Union command was speculating on the possibility of seizing Fort Henry and Donelson and opening a water route into the Confederate heartland. Union General Henry Halleck saw the need to offset successes by Buell in Kentucky. President Abraham Lincoln was also applying pressure to seize Fort Henry. Union General Henry Halleck's subordinates, Ulysses Grant and Andrew H. Foote, both wanted to attack Fort Henry and Fort Donelson. It had rifle pits extending to the river and about 2 miles to the east. Its 17 heavy guns were mounted with 12 facing the river and 5 securing the land approaches. The fort had no ammunition for the 8 of those guns, so only 9 were capable of defending the fort. The fort was undermanned with less than 3,000 troops in 2 brigades, and many of them were new and fresh recruits. The North realized that control of the river would effectively split the Confederacy into 2, resulting in the Confederacy to become weak and hasten the end of the war. The strategic center of the Confederate operations in the West was compromised. When Grant realized that the 2 forts fell, the Confederacy's position in western Tennessee and Kentucky would collapse. Grant set out to capture the forts, which were 12 miles apart, in early 1862. 3 Union gunboats and 17,000 soldiers went into operation against Fort Henry, situated on the Tennessee River. On February 6, 1862, the Confederate garrison surrendered. It was the first significant Union victory of the American Civil War. In an effort to gain control of river and supply lines west of the Appalachians, Union Brigadier General Grant and Commodore Andrew Foote launched an attack on the lightly defended Fort Henry. After a fierce naval bombardment, Confederate Brigadier General Lloyd Tillman secretly evacuated the bulk of his troops to nearby Fort Donelson before surrendering to Union forces. The Union captured the fort, its guns, supplies, and equipment left behind on the garrison. The Union had 40 casualties and the Confederate had 80 casualties. The Union Army was about 15,000 people and the Navy had 1,000 people. The Confederate Army had 3,000 people. The fall of Fort Henry followed 10 days later by the capture of Fort Donelson. It caused an immense amount of damage to the earth. In the first picture, it shows that the Union gunboats are firing at Fort Henry to try to gain control of it, as it would speed up the end of the war. In the second picture, it shows the routes the gunboats took to get to Fort Henry and Fort Donelson. In the third picture, it shows the Battle of Fort Henry and how much damage it caused to the earth. In the fourth picture, it shows the Union boats heading towards Fort Henry by water to gain control of it.
Union General Ulysses S. Grant commanded an army of 15,000 men. As part of Scott's Anaconda Plan, Grant's men surrounded Fort Donelson in February of 1862. Fort Donelson was located on the Cumberland River in Tennessee and was controlled by Confederate Commander General Simon Buckner. The Confederate Army was given 2 choices: fight or starve. On February 15th, Confederate General Gideon Pillow made the fatal mistake of sending his troops out into the trenches instead of safely retreating from the fort. Grant's counterattack reversed any progress Pillow's troops had made. At the end of the battle, Union casualties totaled to be around 2,700. The Confederacy had over 5 times as many casualties. 12,000 of the 16,000 troops were either dead or missing. On February 16th, 5 days after the battle began, the 13,000 remaining Confederate troops surrendered. Buckner offered to surrender under good terms. Grant's only terms were unconditional and immediate surrender. After this battle,
Northern morale was boosted. Grant became nicknamed Unconditional Surrender, and Confederate forces were driven from western Kentucky and most of Tennessee. The Confederacy was very unprepared for the battle at Fort Donelson. Grant had a plan of attack laid out prior to battle, while the Confederate generals planned out their tactics after Grant had already attacked. Grant's strategy was to send 27,000 troops to surround the fort on its land side, and 4 ironclads to block off the side of the fort that had access to the Cumberland River. This would cut off the fort's access to any supplies or extra troops. Both the Union and Confederacy had sharpshooters that would hide in holes in trees, each armed with a Henry rifle and food for the day. They went out early in the morning and returned to their camps at dark to report anything they had seen. Confederate commanders Pillow and Buckner disagreed on battle tactics. This lack of communication and organization among the troops led to the Union victory. The Confederacy never had one specific battle plan and therefore did not have the strength or unity to defeat Grant.
The African-American war worker is placing a key into the post-war security door. On the key, it says efficiency, productivity, promptness, and courtesy. The political cartoon is showing how the slaves helped the whites during the Civil War. The slaves would work very fast and swiftly for the whites. The slaves also picked cotton and made tools and weapons. The slaves also got their work done on time and always came through for the whites, even though how poorly they treated them. The slaves never disrespected the whites due to the fact that they could be whipped or killed. A reader can obviously see that the whites treated the slaves like they were nothing. In this political cartoon, a slave is tearing a map of the United States in half, while a northerner and southerner watch him do so. This shows how the ideas of embellishing slaves were splitting the country into two. The North didn't think it was right to treat the blacks this way, so the Northerners wanted nothing to do with slavery. On the other hand, South wanted the slaves to stay and do farm work while the slaveholders did nothing. This cartoonist is showing how the Southerner has a cowboy hat on and a gun, while the Northerner has a nice suit on and a top hat. The reader can see that the political cartoonist really nailed this cartoon by really showing how the slaves were splitting the North and South. This political cartoon shows how the Anaconda Plan was sectioning off the states from the rest of the country. The anaconda snake in this cartoon represents the border that was proposed in the Anaconda Plan. The anaconda snake squeezes its prey and kills it, which is the same with the plan. This is a very good comparison to the Anaconda Plan because Abraham went through with this plan, it would kill the country. The cartoonist was against the idea of the plan. A reader would think that Abraham was right for not going through with the plan.
The ingredients you will need are 2½ cups of flour, 1 cup of whole milk, 3 small eggs or 2 large eggs, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 3 tablespoons of salted butter, a little more to grease griddle, and another stick to serve, and 1 tablespoon of baking powder.
Sift flour before measuring. Then combine dry ingredients in a bowl and stir well. Melt the butter, mix in with the milk, and then beat eggs and add it to the milk.
Stir liquid ingredients into dry ingredients. You can leave a few lumps. You should have a soft dough or stiff batter. If you want to make biscuits without rings, add a little more flour so that you can pat it out 1/2 inch thick and cut with a drinking glass. Butter muffin rings if using. Heat griddle, grease if necessary, and set down the muffin rings.
Of batter into each ring and brown on both sides. If using biscuit without rings, brown on each side. If using muffin pans, grease the pans, pour batter 1½ full, and bake in a 375-degree oven for 20 minutes. Batter should puff up considerably.